critical to my whole story. But it's that type of precision. A, how do you cut it that precise, and B, how do you move it 500 miles? When you don't even have the wheel.
Well, there was talk about that maybe they had canals and they put them on a barge and had the barges come and then unload it. They have had talk where, they basically took like trees and there's no way you can roll a block like that, through the sand. So
where'd they get the trees from? The Sahara forest. I think that was it, So.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it's what we're talking about is something that happened that begged a lot more than ropes and slave labor. There is some technology that we don't know about that created this stuff, and the precision is just too astounding. It's too Stonehenge, the way it's totally laid out so perfectly. That doesn't happen accidentally.
No.
So same thing with Newgrange and any of the other monuments that have been built worldwide. The Aztec cities, the Mayan cities.
Well, it just makes me just wonder sometimes if we've been rebooted once or twice. We're not the first people, humanoids walking this earth. I got a funny feeling we might be rebooted like 2-3 times already.
I wouldn't be surprised. And the thing is, if we had an ancient civilization, we might have had, as you said, several times. And for whatever reason, they get wiped out by an ice age. They, as I do with my Atlanteans, their island nation slid south in the Indian Ocean and ended up becoming Antarctica. And so they ended up, hollowing out caves and putting all their technology in these caves. So this, who knows what might have happened, but I like the idea of we've been rebooted a few times here.
Well, I do. And a lot of people, still believe the earth is flat. So, but, you got to realize there's no way we could have made the pyramid, made the Sphinx. I just don't think we have the technology. I mean, we don't have the technology to do it now. We're supposed to be so intelligent. There's no way. There's just no way.
Yeah, and the mathematics of the Great Pyramid are so astounding that, if you take the circumference of the base and you multiply it by 43,200, you get the exact diameter or exact circumference of the Earth at the equator. The same thing with the polar radius of the pyramid. It's 43,200 times that, and you got the polar radius of the Earth. You take all the sides that are so precisely laid out, more precisely laid out to line up with the precession of the equinoxes. They're more precisely laid than any skyscraper in New York City. And you take the measurements of the sides and you divide them by, I forget what the number is, but you end up with 365.24, the exact number of days in a year. The internal measurements in the pyramid are the same way. So you don't tell me that a bunch of people, with ropes and slave labor, threw this thing together and it happened to just accidentally come out that precise. And one of the other things that Graham Hancock pointed out was that the polar or the vertical radius of the pyramid also equals in inches the average height above sea level of Earth's land masses. I mean, that's mind-boggling, So, and it was also the pyramid was built exactly on the 30th parallel, or it's just very slightly off of it, but exact enough to be exact. And that was, how did they do these measurements? How did they find that out? They had to have some really advanced technology to do that.
Oh, yeah. So what do you think is going to happen as Antarctica starts more breaking up and melting? Do you think like any pyramids are going to start popping up?
Well, it would be interesting. I'm kind of, of two minds. I'd say, on the one hand, I'd love to see that there's some remnants of an advanced civilization here that we can kind of, say, yes, I told you so. On the other hand, if it's melting the way it's melting, we're going to be so far underwater in a short period of time that we're never going to find out the answer to that question. But I think that, there, at one time, I think that that very well may have been, an inhabited nation with advanced technology. So and the reason I think this, there's a million theories about where Atlantis was, and most of the places are located in around the Mediterranean, and a couple of them just outside, both north and south of the Straits of Gibraltar. But it was the quote from Plato that I opened the book up with, where he talks about the Great War between Athens and Atlantis, 9,000 years before he was writing this, which would have put it around 12,500 years ago, because Plato was writing 2,500 years ago or 2,400 years ago. So, he's writing about this event that happened 9,000 years before him. And he talked about Atlantis being a great island nation, bigger in mass than Libya, that gradually sank beneath the waves. I think if you're standing on the shore of Africa and you look out at, a big island in the Indian Ocean and it gradually disappears, it's going to look like it sank. But it might have been drifting south on its tectonic plate. Why not? So I grabbed that idea as to use in my book. I figured it was as good as any. So.
Yeah, well, you might be accurate on that one too. In the news the other day that one of the satellites from NASA caught something that was really interesting in Antarctica. They found a huge. Now they don't know what it is. Something under the ice. Because the ice is melting now, they can actually penetrate deeper into it. They don't know if it was a huge meteor strike where it created a huge crater, or if it's a building of structures of some kind.
Oh, that's really cool. I hadn't heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a building of some kind, that kind of, maybe your theory in your book could be totally right.
Who knows? And what I like about my theory is it's as plausible as any of the other theories. So let's maybe not completely plausible, but it's enough in a work of fiction to kind of suspend your disbelief and kind of let your imagination run wild a little bit.
It does, and besides Atlantis, in your book being where Antarctica, there was even back about 20 years ago, somebody claimed that, it was actually off of Cuba,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and they found some type of remains and said, oh, that's where Atlantis was. But I really think more your way of Antarctica, just because, this makes more logical sense. Otherwise, I think we would have found it by now.
Yeah, and there's also evidence worldwide, and I think that there's something, I believe it was off the Florida coast near Bimini, I think, underwater. They saw these, there's all these square stones that look like they've been cut. It's almost like a roadway type thing. And it's the same thing in Japan. They've got these underwater man-made monuments and these huge things with stairs and passageways. And when you think about it, back before all the ice melted from the Ice Age, the ocean level was a lot lower. And maybe we did have cities that were in these locations that were great cities built by advanced civilizations. Why not?
Well, it does make sense, too. I've seen some of those, years ago in films and stuff of, like a highway under the ocean. And again, some of the structures I've seen where, again, statues and stuff are, in the ocean where, they weren't just dropped there. So it tells you that the sea level has been rising. And at one point, you're probably right. The sea level was not anywhere near what it is now. My concern is if people own property in Florida, you'd be better off selling it in the next 10 years and then trying to hang on if you're young enough.
Well, and I'm up here in Rhode Island, and we've got some of the same issues. Between the Greenland ice melt and the Antarctic ice melt and the Arctic Ocean melt, our sea levels are rising up here. So we're looking at all of, Boston, Providence, any number of cities along the East Coast, anything, all along the Long Island Sound and New York City itself. tremendous vulnerability to rising water and no plan to do anything about it.
Well, they don't have a plan. How can you?
Yeah. And Florida is really interesting. Florida is just, right now, high tide in Fort Lauderdale down through Miami Beach. Streets are flooded. And, of course, everything down there it's all porous. So you could build all the dikes in the world around South Florida, and the water is still just going to seep straight up. So I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be a huge problem for South Florida.
Well, like I said, I think we've gone to the point where it's gone past the tipping point. And I really feel sorry for my grandkids because they're the ones that are going to see all the earth changes happening. I just don't think anything we do now, and of course, you have certain governments right now that are in denial of what's happening. But, that could have been the same thing happen like with Atlantis. They were in denial of what was going to happen to them. Yeah,
and it's a good point. And this probably happens with every civilization. Hey, everything's been fine. Things can't possibly go bad. You're just making it all up just to scare me. It's like, folks. You may not like science, but it's always right. It's and you have to start paying attention to this stuff. I'm hoping that, and I've got granddaughters and a grandson. And they're children right now, but, I'm saying, geez, I hope they're going to have the tools, to deal with all this because, it's going to be dumped right in their lap.
Oh, yeah, because I even talking like in San Francisco, all that area will go underwater, and, first they were saying it was going to be 200 years, then it's 100. Now they start talking around like 2040 that, places like New York are going to start, being beachfront property. That's what is really scaring me. And, of course, we don't do anything. We still use, the government could actually put a stop to us using all this fuel, taking the blood from the earth and, creating all this stuff, which is causing the problems. It won't probably stop it at this point, but it could slow us and buy us more time.
Well, that's it. But we have to make a full-time commitment. And locally, you have that type of commitment being made. Rhode Islanders are very sensitive about the environment because we're so close to the coast. And we have a wonderful oceanographic institute at the University of Rhode Island, and they've been working in partnership with the state to look at the tidal marshes. And so they are the existing tidal marshes. Those are very critical to the ecosystem. It's a link in the chain, but they're being flooded out. And so what we have to create new marshes on a little bit higher ground to accommodate this. So we're trying to do it, but it's like, boy, shoveling sand against the tide,
Yeah, I don't think we can win on this point. Now, going back into your book here, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Without giving the plot away.
Okay. All right, my central character is one that's I think everybody is so intrigued about. I decided, because I wanted to have a genetic linkage between the people of Atlantis and the people of today. And I made that link through my central character, who's Dr. Gordon Tallbear. He's a PhD anthropologist who also happens to be an Oglala Sioux Indian. So it turns out that in the book, and I'm not giving anything away because you're going to find this out within the first 30 pages, but I start the book off 12,500 years ago with the building of the Great Pyramid as to how it all came about so they could start building it. And then I jump to 8,000 years ago when Atlantis was sending out exploration teams all over the planet to help emerging societies, learn the art of planting and learning how to read the stars and to help them with planting cycles and things like that. And one of my exploration teams from Atlantis is in the upper Midwest and in what is now South Dakota. And the leader gets separated from his fellows, and he gets kidnapped by a local tribe. But he gets assimilated into the tribe. And today, then I jump to the modern day, where his remains are discovered, largely mummified. And with his remains, there's a curious device, and it turns out to be an electronic device and it was what the Atlanteans used to communicate and